really interesting person. So I'm excited to hear what they have to say. Go ahead, Calen.
Awesome. Thank you for that introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm Calen Otto. I'm currently in North Carolina right now. I saw other people on the chat were too. But like everyone on here, I'm very excited to learn about travel and teach you some things that I've learned along the way. So let me start with my presentation and pull this up. Let's see. All right. All right. Can everyone see the presentation? And me at the same time? All good? Okay, let me pull it back up then. All right. Here we go. So today I will be talking about extreme budget traveling, the art of unruly travel on a budget. This is me. And yeah, I am the founder of the Unruly Travel blog, and I also have a guidebook now where I share a lot of the story that I'm sharing today and then break down all the things we're talking about today into even smaller categories. And I have a podcast where I interview interesting people on the road that I meet. So I kind of, you have to show where you've been for the travel creds. Like, yes, been a lot of places. But I've had a really unique experience doing all of this. So today I'll share my backstory about biking partly across the US, and then we'll break down all these ways where you can really like hardcore budget travel if you are on a smaller budget. And then we're going to talk about more ethical and thoughtful travels, because that is a huge part of what I do, what I'm passionate about, and my blog. So how I became the Unruly and you can see in pink here, this was my route. Before that, I don't think that I had ever been to the west side of the US before. So it was all very, very new for me. I didn't grow up in a family that travels. Like, we only went to Florida. So this was all very new for me. And I want to leave you with a note before we go into this story that, I'm very aware everyone experiences the world differently based on their race, gender, class, all these different things, abilities. So my story, I have a lot of privilege going into it as a white person. I am non-binary, but as someone who's just seen as a woman. And yeah, so everything that I share today was my experience, and I know that your experience is going to be different, and I definitely want to acknowledge that to begin with. And I also want to acknowledge the missing white women syndrome, because in my story today and in the tips that I give you, we're going to be talking about some things that are maybe more dangerous or more risky than the normal travel tips that you get, such as hitchhiking, dumpster diving, things like that. So yeah, I just want to acknowledge that that is a real thing. And after this presentation, if you sign up for my email list, you will get this, my slides as a PDF, and you can click on the sources and you can read more about missing white women syndrome and learn a little bit more there. All right, so my story, like I said, I was 19 years old and I had the travel bug. I had just gotten back from South America for a year abroad. But long story short, I had a broken foot, I was out of a job, and I really, really wanted to travel. And at the same time, I was kind of at the age where you learn about all the really terrible things in the world. For me, at least, that's when I started to learn about that. And I just felt really discouraged. So I looked around, I had a bike. I didn't have money. I was just living at my parents' house, and I didn't have an income at the time. And I just heard that people had traveled across the USA on a budget and they would work for everything as they went. So I thought, all right, I'm going to do the same. And I had never biked more than like 13 miles before that. And during my preparation for this bike trip, I honestly never biked more than like 20 miles. So I was very not prepared. I was very young and ambitious. But you can see on the screen, this is my setup. This is what it looked like. That was my tent that I would just, throw up in a park behind a bush or something. That was my bike that I was traveling with. And so, yeah, I have to tell you how I did things. So I started with a $300 gift card, and I'll tell the story in the next slide, but I used it when I crashed my bike and I had to repair it. So that's where that $300 went. So after that, it was like no cash on me, no credit card, nothing like that. And so I followed the Trans America Trail, which is not an actual trail. It's not a bike trail. You're just traveling on roads, but they've kind of pieced together for you where you can stop for water, sometimes where you can sleep in a park, where you can sleep in a church, different things like that. So I would bike and then I would throw my tent up somewhere. I never had it planned. So that day I'd be figuring out, okay, where am I at? What can I do? So, my transportation at first was just biking. And then every night I was either staying with a stranger I had met that day, with someone through warm showers, which we'll talk more about later, through couch surfing, or I would throw my tent up somewhere and hope that it would be fine. And then for food, I've been vegan for a long time, and I was vegan during this trip, and I would work for food as I went. So I would walk into a grocery store or a restaurant or cafe and ask if I could work in exchange for a meal that day. Like everything that I needed, it was like boom, 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 had to get it on the spot while I was on the road. And I also did things like dumpster diving. And then later on in my trip, I got into hitchhiking and different things like that, other ways to get around. So at first I thought it was going to be this solid trip where I would bike all the way across the US and I'd prove to myself I could do it. But then I had so much fun going off the beaten path that I decided, we'll just see what happens. So just a couple examples for you on this slide of things that happened during the trip. There's Crater Lake up in this corner. You can see with the sunrise view. I met someone through the couch surfing app who had rented a car, and I got to go to that national park for the first time. And the picture right beside it, where it's me and 3 other people, I was biking and it was a really, really hot day. And I saw this cute little like cottage place that you could rent. And they had a really nice pool, and I really wanted to get into the pool. So I stopped in and I was like, hey, could I do an exchange to use your pool for the day? And they're like, we actually need our pool cleaned. So if you want to clean it, you can have the pool for the day. So weird things like that would happen during my trip. And like I said, I was 19 years old. I was doing this alone, but you'll see on the corner, there's me with a bunch of people and a bike. I met a retired group who was biking across the USA at some point on this trip, and they let me join in with them for about 100 miles. So I never could have planned anything that happened. And I met so many incredible people along the way. And I was very scared going into it. But as I moved across the USA, my sort of faith in humanity, when people really help you out and show up for you, started to come back again. So a few key stories I want to share with you about this trip, because I think it explains a lot. And a trip like this, where I spent, I can't remember if it was 4 or 6 months on the road, is so much to try to tell in a limited amount of time. But I have to tell you some key stories. So this picture, you can see where I have scrapes down my back. Like I said, I wasn't very prepared on this trip. I didn't know what I was doing. And so 2 or 3 days into my trip, I find myself in the back roads of Virginia. And on my maps, it said that the street signs might be missing. So it's kind of hard to navigate around here. And I realized that the street signs were gone, they were missing, they were off. And I found myself in the middle of nowhere with my bike with no service. And I couldn't really go up to any of the houses because we were really out in the country, and there was like the dogs and the no trespassing signs. And it takes a lot of privilege to be able to just call the police when you need something. But that's what I did at the time. I called the police. They dropped me off on a highway, and it's illegal to bike on a highway. So I'm not sure why that happened. So I'm biking down the highway, and I'm so upset. Like my 3rd day into my bike trip, it's already going terrible. I don't know what I'm doing. I've called the police. I've gotten lost. Like, what's going on? And I hear my phone ding. And it was actually a notification from Tinder. It's this guy, Hayden, who's at the bottom corner of the screen. There's like a little sunset thing behind us. And he said, "Hey, how's the trip going? I've already done this. I've biked across the US. Do you need help? What's going on?" And I just told him everything, like how bad it was going, all of these things. And so he picks me up. This was my first time going off of the Transamerica Trail, just going off of the path. And I had such a wonderful time. I spent about a week with him. I hung out with him and his roommates. I even went to his family's wedding. So now I'm like in these wedding pictures. There's probably like, who is this random person? And at the end of my stay with him, he said, "I'm going to drop you off at a place that you're going to love. This is like going to be your favorite place." So he drops me off on the Blue Ridge Parkway. I did not love it. There was a huge hill in front of me, and I biked up all day. And when it was time to go down, I started going. It's getting dark. It was a really curvy, mountainous road. And because of my lack of experience and practice, I started flying down this hill between 35 to 45 miles per hour. I was barely making the turns. Cars were coming up the hill, and I was like almost clipping them head on. It was getting really scary. I was trying to brake. I was trying to stop. I like couldn't even feel my hands anymore. That's how hard I was pulling on the brakes. And it just, I was barely clipping these cars as they came up. So I had a life flash before your eyes moment. Like, I'm about to get hit by a car. I can't control this anymore. I'm going so fast. So I closed my eyes and the bike went across the road. It jumped over a ditch and I slammed headfirst into a tree. And that was like the first really hard thing on this bike trip, because I ended up getting a concussion, a small concussion. My bike was crumpled, my bags exploded. It was a hot mess. And eventually, after I'd say over an hour of standing by the side of the road trying to get a ride into town, a really nice couple picked me up, and they happened to know someone who owned a hotel in town that was right next to a bike shop. It was literally the first bike shop that I had seen on this trip. So as I tell this story, you'll notice this theme of like me getting into trouble, and somehow it weirdly works out really well. So this couple dropped me off, and then I used that $300 gift card to get my bike repaired. So after that, I was out of money, and it was like the second week into this trip. So, I do all those things that I told you about, the walking in and asking to work for food, or meeting people during the day, having a great connection and sleeping on their couch at night. Hitchhiking after that bike trip because I had a concussion and it felt really hard to bike. I was sore. I was really bruised, all of these things. So I was utilizing all of these things that I had never used before. And I make it across the country. It takes me 4 to 6, probably 4 months to make it across the country. And California, and everything will be perfect. But it wasn't. I was in California for the first time. I thought it would be really hot, but it wasn't. It was really cold. I was on the coast in Northern California. I had $7 at that time because I would work sometimes, do random odd jobs for cash. I had $7. I remember the campsite was 10. They were not budging. It was getting dark. And my host that was supposed to host me that night canceled on me last minute. So I didn't know where I was staying. I had this meltdown, and you can see this couple here with the bright flowers in front of them. I kind of had a meltdown in front of their driveway, and they were trying to pull in, and they were like, "Hey, are you okay?" And at this point, I'm already like crying. The show's over, and I'm just like, you know what? I just don't know what I'm doing. Like, I've come all the way across the country. I still don't know what I'm doing. And so, yeah, they were so sweet. I stayed with them again over a week. We did beach trips together. I really wanted to hug a cow, so we like searched for cows all week. And I ended up working on their catering company that they had because they needed some extra help. And I made enough money to fly to Hawaii for the first time. So I just met so many people on this trip that I never would have met otherwise. Also, like Brother Tom, this older guy who's up here in the corner with the white beard. He's in his 70s. I met him on my bike trip, And we still write each other like handwritten letters every month. He's like my adopted grandpa. So I just met people from all over different ages and races and all this stuff that I wasn't exposed to in my life before that. And I went on these amazing adventures, right? I'm like my first time in California. I got to see the Redwoods. I got to go biking through the Redwoods with brother Tom. And by the way, he was like kicking my butt. He was in way better shape than I am. So it was just a really interesting trip. And I learned so much, and things like going to Hawaii for the first time and staying with a friend there happened that I never would have expected to happen. So I came back with all these life lessons, with all these new friends and contacts across the USA. And I saw the country in a way that, I had never seen before. And I didn't realize just how beautiful and diverse it is here. We always hear about other countries, but there is so much here too. And I feel like I really got to know this land that we are on now. So after those stories, we are going to get into how to utilize some of these things, these services, organizations, things that I did along the way, so that you can save money when you travel. And then you can then take that money to travel longer, to spend it on experiences that really enrich your travels while you're traveling. So I have some disclaimers here, right? Because a lot of the things that I'm talking about today, you have to assess your own privilege levels, how comfortable you are with some of these things. If this goes bad, what's the result for you? Things like that. Like I said, everyone's different. Everyone experiences things differently. So you really have to feel into some of these things I'm talking about to know if it's right for you and if it's worth the risk. Okay, so before we get into what you're doing on the road, we have to talk about before you even leave. I live very frugally, and I also travel very frugally. I'll say the one thing that I do spend a lot of money on is really good food, because I'm just like obsessed with good vegan food. But I always am thinking, where can I cut out expenses in my everyday life? So I'm really lucky because that top house that you can see in this picture here, I live off grid. My partner built a house before I even met him and moved in. And so I don't have like a mortgage. I don't have rent. I don't have to pay for electricity or water because we use solar. We get water from the mountain. And not everyone is as lucky as me to move into a house like that. But we're just seeing where in our lives can we spend a little bit less money. Like a lot of people these days, are living in vehicles. They're doing tiny houses, natural buildings, work trades for accommodations. And there's all these different subjects, right, where you can look at how can I spend a little bit less. So food, I always talk about eating a plant-based diet. It's proven that it's the cheapest diet for those living in the US or in more developed countries. And things like growing your own food, going to the farmer's market, cooking at home. And then when it comes to products and stuff in your everyday life, can you use reusable things? Can you DIY, make it at home? Can you thrift? Like my whole life is thrifting or making it myself, or figuring out how to borrow it from someone, or, taking people's trash and using that in a different way. And I always like to add to, I have this little thing down here. It says $1 equals one night. A few years ago, I went to Thailand and I stayed in a hostel that costed less than $1. And obviously not every place is that cheap. That was an exception. Also, I got what I paid for. It wasn't the nicest hostel. It wasn't the best experience. But now in my everyday life, like say I'm thinking of buying a new shirt or something, and it's $30. I'm thinking that's 30 nights. That's a whole month in a hostel for me. That's a whole month I could spend in another country and my housing is paid for. So I'm always thinking about this stuff before I hit the road. I'm thinking about everyday spending. So later on, when you download this presentation, you can click on some of these links and learn more about these ways to save money before you even leave home. All right, budget transportation trips, because you have to have a way to get where you're going. The ones on the screen right now are things that most of us are familiar with, right? Like taking the bus, flying, doing trains. You know, these are things that we're more familiar with, and you can learn how to travel hack and use points. Um, but I always like to tell people, use roamtorio.com. You'll see it linked right there, because then you compare the prices of all these like regular ways of travel, and you can see what's going to be cheapest, what's going to be fastest, what's going to be most comfortable for you. So later on, you know, you can kind of go through these slides. And example, when I'm flying, I always use a budget flight engine. I'm not buying like first class. I'm not buying the regular trips that they have. I'm always trying to see how I can get these things for a budget on a better deal. And one time on my bike trip, I asked to work in exchange for a bus ticket, and they were actually going to let me do it, but then I changed my plans. So I'm just encouraging you to think outside the box sometimes. You know, can you work directly in exchange for what you need? Is there another way to do this? And also vehicles. I have crossed the US and back in my van, and that's my van in the picture that's on the screen. And I want to make some points about vehicle and van living, motorhome travel, all of those things. I feel like we see so many pictures online these days of these decked out vans that cost, you know, tens of thousands of dollars. Mine's just a normal van, and we took the seats out, and you'll see this very soon what it looks like inside. But it's just what I have to work with, and it's simple and it's not super fancy, but it gets the job done. So I'm just encouraging you to not feel like you have to be like the influencers or, you know, the really shiny travel bloggers who have all of these things. And during my van trip, I also learned how to find free parking almost every single night. And I kind of learned it the hard way. So I have all these resources linked for you on how you can find free parking while you're traveling in a van. All right. So here, as promised, this is the inside of my van. This setup cost less than $5, actually. We took the seats out, so there's just like a normal floor in there. And we used scrap wood and paint to build the shelves that you see. And the only money that we spent was on those bungee cords, you know, to hold everything in. So your setup does not have to be the most fancy. Another thing about traveling in a vehicle is that you will most likely run into vehicle troubles at some point. So, you know, now I would account for that ahead of time, where I have a job and I have money saved up and I save up for trips. But back in the day when I was doing my trip, I probably wouldn't have cared and thought like, I'll get to it when I come to it. So that's something you have to be aware of for yourself. And my third point about living and traveling in a vehicle is that it will test your relationship with whoever you're traveling with. Like this tiny van that I spent 2 months in, you can see how small the bed is. I was with my partner, but we were not going to spend money to rent another vehicle or buy another vehicle. We're like, we're using what we have. So it will really test your relationship. And budget travel doesn't always mean that you're uncomfortable, but a lot of times, you know, you're just working with what you have. So you might be a little bit more uncomfortable. All right. So now these are I like these transportation tips better. These are more exciting. Some other ways of traveling, if you're able to, biking. Some people, there's quite a few people actually that have biked across the US or bike up one coast or down a coast or from state to state. And it's such an interesting way of traveling, of seeing this country and interacting with people in ways that you know, usually wouldn't have. Again, you don't need the most expensive bike. And a lot of people like to ask me, can you tell me about biking, like bike traveling, and can you help me with a bike? So there's a ton of free resources on my blog. When you download this, you'll be able to find them. You can listen to podcasts I did with other solo female bikers who were very young when they crossed the US on their bike. But the thing is, with finding a bike that's right for you, it doesn't have to be the most fancy bike. It just has to be comfortable enough that you can spend a lot of time on it, and you don't want it breaking down, you know, every 5 minutes when you're on the road. A lot of people don't know that across the US, there are a lot of really cool bike shops that will help you build your own bike out of materials that they already have. Or if they don't have that program, it's great to go in and say, hey, this is the type of trip I want to do. This is what I'm looking for. They can tell you about a good bike there. They can teach you all about the bike, how to use it, how to do repairs for free. And then you can go on Craigslist or you can go online and look for a used bike of that type that you really liked. So biking is a big one, obviously. There's a lot to learn about biking and hitchhiking. I also have podcast episodes with other solo young female travelers who use hitchhiking a lot because, it's kind of that on the go, you find a ride when you need it and you don't have to pay for it. So I don't have enough time to teach you how to do the biking or how to do the hitchhiking or any of these things on here, but I have a lot of free resources on my blog, and you can always message me or reach out to me if you want to learn more. But I'm going to tell you some safety tips that are very important for hitchhiking and all of these things that we're talking about that, are a little more dangerous than just getting on a bus. So I am always telling someone where I am if I'm hitchhiking or I'm getting into a vehicle with someone I don't know about. I like to know the license plate number. You can even take a picture of the driver and send it to someone if that's possible. And learning how to trust your own intuition is very important, especially for females or queer folks, especially for budget travel, because again, you're kind of relying on the goodness and the kindness of other people, which isn't always there. So really tuning into yourself and, before I get in a vehicle, if this doesn't feel right, I'm saying, nope, I'm not going this way. Actually, my friend called and they're coming to pick me up, or just, no, thanks. Thanks though. So working on that is really important. And then, you can see more safety tips here, but just something practical like bringing mace for yourself for self-defense is huge too. Even if you never use it, I never used it on my trip across the country. It's nice to know that you have it. All right, another type of budget travel that is almost free is walking and hiking. If you're able to do that, you can backpack an established trail in the US like the PCT, or the AT, which is on the East Coast. But I also know a lot of people, actually, more than you would think, that have walked across different countries or walked across the USA, and they usually carry a cart. Or not carry, they usually push a cart with them. So it's a thing, walking across a country or across countries or other things. And I've interviewed people who have done that. So this link here, that's where it takes you to those podcast episodes so you can learn for free how to do these things. And then last but not least, one of my favorites is Craigslist rideshare. I don't know a lot of people who know about this or use it, but basically with Craigslist rideshare, you can post on there like, hey, I'm trying to go from Colorado to California. Is anyone going that way on these dates at this time? And people don't get your email, but you'll get emails back in your inbox, and you can get a ride for free. Also, sometimes people are moving across the country and they want someone to drive their car for them. So you'll get a free car to go where you need to go, and you'll get your gas paid for, and you're not sharing a car with anyone. So there's a lot of interesting things that happen on Craigslist rideshare. Oh, can you still see my screen?
No, it disappeared.
Okay, let me try that again.
Yeah,
it just
no worries.
disappeared. Okay. Let me see. Oh no. Okay, so basically what I was saying with that is there are a lot of interesting things that happen on Craigslist rideshare, which a lot of people do not know about. Let me pull this presentation up really quick so I can get back on track again. And then I'll share my screen with you again. So I hope everyone's enjoying the stories and and all the extreme budget ways of traveling. And the thing is too, while this opens, that I want to mention is that you don't have to use all of these tips at once. Like, you don't have to go all out like I did and bike across the US and work for everything as you go. you can pick and choose. You can say, I'm going to do this, but I want to save money here. I want to save money on transportation, or I want to save money on food, and, you know, pick and choose as you go. You don't have to use everything at once because it's very extreme and it's very intense. Okay, so let me get my presentation back up here and share this with you again. Okay. Can you see my screen again?
Yes, it's slowly loading, but you know, internet.
Okay. All right. Let's get back to where we were. Okay. Let's exit out of these. All right. So we went through that. Okay. Yeah, so Craigslist rideshare, very interesting. And you can also give people a ride, you know, get that good traveler karma energy out there. So you can also post if you're going somewhere and you want to give folks a ride. And then lastly, I like to ask, you know, what else can you think of? What other ways of travel can you think of? I know people who take kayaking trips. You know, they kayak a river and then they get out and camp and then they go travel and explore and then they come back. I met someone who longboarded across Australia. I also know people who will work for cruise lines or airlines so that they get free rides that way and they're able to travel more. So, you know, what else can you think of? That's just something for you to kind of have some brain food. And budget tips for food. We're going to start with my favorite on this one, dumpster diving. I love the idea of dumpster diving because a lot of perfectly edible, healthy produce gets thrown out every single day around the world. And it does take some privilege to be able to dumpster dive, right? Because a lot of times they don't want houseless people doing it, or there's the chance that they'll call the police. So this doesn't happen a lot, but it's something that you have to consider. But dumpster diving, there's a lot of fresh produce that are thrown away. And if you stick to all the plant-based foods, nothing is going bad, nothing's going sour. There's this guy named Rob Greenfield, and he has free resources and a whole guide to dumpster diving. And he also has promised to pay for people's bail or ticket, or if anyone runs into legal problems while dumpster diving, he has a promise to cover that. I know a lot of people who dumpster dive, no one's ever ran into trouble, but it's there for you just in case you decide to do it and something does happen. But my one thing that I want you to remember about dumpster diving is please leave dumpsters as clean as possible after going in and taking your free, delicious food, so that other people are able to dumpster dive later. Because if you leave it a mess, they'll often lock dumpsters. As dumpster diving becomes more popular, you know, people are building fences and locks so that, you know, you can't access this free food. And then working in a direct exchange for food. So, like I said, on my bike trip, I was walking into places. I would do things like pull weeds, sweep the parking lot, crush boxes, work in the back kitchen, just for a day for food, which also takes a lot of privilege, right? Because houseless people do this all the time and are denied. But it was working for me during that trip. I met a lot of interesting people by doing that. But there's also official programs that you can use, like woofing, which a lot of you have probably heard about before. It's worldwide opportunities on organic farms where you are working directly in exchange for food and lodging. Now, this is great because it, like I said, it covers your food and your lodging, and you can do this in the USA and beyond. You go online, you can see profiles of organic farms, and it's not always like a huge farm like you're thinking. It might just be like a microgreen garden or something like that. It's not always this huge farm. And you can even check like vegan if you don't want to be on farms that are actively exploiting animals. So that's what I always do. Some tips for wolfing, because I have wolfed a lot. I have had a lot of interesting experiences, and I'm sure if you have used it before, you have too. Um, Always read the reviews of your host before saying I'm going to stay somewhere, before getting there. Try to talk to them face to face, even if that's online, before you arrive, to get a feel of how this is going to go. And be sure to set boundaries and agree on your work hours ahead of time. There are a lot of awesome people on Wolf, but there are also some people who just want free labor and they're not giving anything in exchange. So it's really important to kind of vet people ahead of time. But these are some ways to get free or almost free food. Some other random things, like you'll notice if you're backpacking or you're hiking or you're doing something more rootsy like this in traveling, that there are a lot of travelers and just random people that want to share food with you all the time. So that's awesome. And that's really fun. And it's a way to connect with people. And then when you have the resources, you know, you can share with other people or travelers, even if you're traveling yourself. So those are some ways to save money on food or get it for free. And budget lodging tips. Like we just talked about, there are those programs that include your lodging. And usually with these programs, you don't pay. You might pay a once a year fee to use the service, like the server to connect you with people to work for. But other than that, you're not paying any money. There's, Workaway, trusted house sitters, Wolf, like we just talked about. And when I was on my trip, I was doing a lot of going on Facebook or social media and saying, hey, I'm in New Mexico and I really want to stay here for a month. Does anyone need me to house sit or pet sit? And a lot of time, friends of friends would set me up with these people who then became my friends. And I would get to stay in a house for free in an area I wanted to be in. And they would get to go do whatever they needed to do. So outside of programs like that, you can tent. You can bring a tent with you. It's really hard to do this in the USA because there's so much private property. And, people are really jumpy about that. But if you are biking, the Transamerica maps, paper maps that you get will show you places where you can camp for free, like public places and parks. Also, BLM land is great. Bureau of Land Management is public land across the USA. There's more out west, but usually it's just untouched land, or it's like a fancy campground and it's completely free. So whenever you're traveling, whether you're tenting or you're parking a motorhome or a van, or, you just need a place to stay, look for BLM land. There's usually other people staying there as well. And it's getting more popular. So they're having more facilities there, but also people are just starting to kind of live on BLM land. Like, they put their camper there and they've been there for like 6 months now. So that's a really cool resource. And you can always Google online to see if there's public land, public property you can stay on. And honestly, if you meet a really cool person, say you just got into town, you meet a really cool person that you feel comfortable with, you can always ask to pitch a tent in their yard. And then we have couch surfing. So a lot of you have probably heard of this, but couch surfing is an official way to stay on other people's couches. And it's not always a couch. Sometimes you have a whole room to yourself. Sometimes you have a whole house to yourself. But it's another free resource where you pay a one-time fee or a yearly fee. And it's a network of travelers who like to host other travelers. So you stay for free. And, you can kind of think of it as a free Airbnb, but there's this expected cultural or social exchange that goes along with it. So if you're not on couch surfing, it's awesome to get on there. You can also just meet up with people in your area through couch surfing, and you can host other people. And then we have warm showers, which is the couch surfing of cycling. So it's for bikers. When you're biking across the US, use warm showers to connect with people and find places to stay for free. And then kind of, what we're doing here and what you're doing in your everyday lives and when you travel, be sure to network. Whenever I meet awesome people, wherever I go, I'm saying, hey, are you on Instagram? Can I get your number? I'm staying in touch with them because one day I'm going to want to stay with them when I'm visiting their country or their hometown. And then I can offer a place for them to stay when they come and visit me. So really creating a strong network is going to help you spend less money on places to stay when you're traveling. And then finding work. So here are some interesting pictures you'll see up on the screen. Um, some things I've done randomly to make money to travel. One, I shaved my head, and I didn't know that you could sell your hair, but I did shave my hair in Thailand. I ended up making $600 off of selling that hair. You can see me up here on top of a camper. I was once staying with my friend's dad in California in his camper, and he needed someone to clean the roof. So I did that. I cleaned other camper roofs, and I made some cash that I got to use to travel with. Life modeling, where you are a nude artist and people paint you. They actually pay really, really well for that. It's a great meditation. I used to do that, and I actually know a guy who life modeled across the USA to make money to be able to travel. And then the bottom picture where there's someone, like holding a pot, that was when I was working on that catering crew that I told you all about in the beginning when I was telling stories. So these are all random things, right? So I'm like, you have to get very creative to travel on a budget. But there's also these days a lot of online and remote jobs that you can do if you want to be a digital nomad and make money. So you could work from your computer and then also wolf at the same time. So you have free lodging, free food, and you're making money at the same time. Like I said, there's a lot of combos, a lot of ways to pull these things together. And then temporary gigs, right? You could work at a hostel, work at a seasonal job, yoga teacher, things like that, that kind of allow you to travel and move with the work. So I like to tell people to just market your skills, your creativity, post flyers up. Flyers are still really awesome. Share things online on your social media, and Craigslist, word of mouth are great ways to make some cash to use to travel before you go or while you're on the road. All right, so those were all, I'm just checking the time here. Those were all ways that you're going to be able to travel further and have more meaningful experiences. But I also like to talk about ethical travel for multiple reasons. One reason being that thinking about how we're traveling, this ethical way of traveling is often cheaper. So it ties into this budget thing. And also it's just really important for me because I feel like we as travelers, we love to see the world. We love to see, natural phenomenons. We love to go to the beach and go snorkeling and see ocean life and meet new people. So I feel like we have a responsibility to protect and conserve as much as we can, other species and the planet and other humans. So that's why ethical travel is so important to me. And other people, we want other people, younger generations, to be able to travel like we do and see the things that we see. So I think it's really important that we do our best to travel as lightly as possible. So things that I do not participate in at home or when I travel is eating animals, riding animals, the animal trekking, the horse carriage rides, the camel rides, aquariums, basically animal tourism, small and large. All these, ways that we interact with animals during our travels do have consequences. They are bad for the animals, they are bad for the planet. And there are some links here when you download the PDF that you can investigate a little bit more. So I'm going to tell you some things you can do instead, but I want to dive into this a little bit deeper about animal tourism and why this is so important. So first of all, one point I'd like to make is that to ride another animal, they must be broken. And breaking them basically means breaking down their spirit, forcing them into submission. And I know this because I used to ride horses. I used to compete in competitions. I used to break horses. So I really know what the process is like. So I don't participate in that anymore just because of how unethical it is. And there's a few things that I have shared here, a few statements and facts that have really shaped my travels by saying, and have pushed me in a direction. I will participate in this and I won't in this. So a couple things that I feel like are really important to share. You can always come back and read these facts and kind of take them in. But 70% of macroplastic at sea comes from fishing gear. Only 0.03 comes from plastic straws. You know, we love going to the beach. We love going on snorkeling trips, all this stuff while we're traveling. So I feel like it's so important to protect the ocean. And everyone is doing the save the straw thing, which is great. But I also want to show this is why we need to stop eating fish because of all the plastic. Most of the plastic going into the ocean is from the fishing industry. And then again, in the spirit of protecting animals and the planet while we're traveling, I like to share that clearing land for cattle, sheep, and other farmed animals called livestock is the greatest single driver of habitat loss and the leading cause of species extinction, ocean dead zones, and water pollutions. So this is another reason why I'm huge on travelers not eating animals, eating plant-based or doing it as much as possible, because wherever we go, we want to respect those habitats. We want to respect the people who live there and depend on those water sources. So, you know, eating a plant-based diet is going to be most affordable for you in high-income countries. And there's a link for that study that you can look at, and it's going to be best for everyone who lives there. So that's why I really like to talk about these things. And you can come back to this slide and kind of look a little bit more into this information. All right, so I sucked all the fun out of your travels when it comes to, you know, entertainment and animal tourism, all these things. But I have some things you can do instead, like volunteering at vegan animal sanctuaries, where you can interact with animals in ethical ways, where they still have their autonomy. They are still living as free as a life as possible. I love local art, vegan food tours, you know, human dance performances, snorkeling, swimming, seeing animals in their natural habitat without interfering. And I want to mention that you could go to sanctuarytour.org. It is a podcast that I run where I interview vegan animal sanctuaries across the US and in other countries. And so whenever you're traveling, whatever state you're in, whatever country you're in, most likely there is an ethical animal sanctuary there. You can look that up. You can drop in, you can give belly rubs to pigs, you can hug roosters, you can, you know, take a nap with cows, all these amazing things. So that will help you find sanctuaries wherever you go. And we are at the end of my presentation. If you want to learn more, because I have so many more stories, and you know, you can dive into these subjects like biking, hitchhiking, all of these things. You can really dive into it a lot. You can connect with me on all of these places shown on your screen. I have a lot of free information, a lot of like raw stories from people who have done these things. And I have a travel guide, and it's always sold on a sliding scale to be more accessible. You can order like a physical copy, or you can download an ebook. And yeah, it tells you even more stories and breaks down all of these subjects even more. So thank you so much for watching my presentation. I know we kind of had to go through things fast because it's a lot to cover, but I hope that you can take some of these practices that I talked about and lengthen your travels and enrich them even more. So hopefully now you have a good idea of why I'm called the Unruly Traveler. I have the Unruly Travel blog. All right.
Great. Thank you so much, Calen. I know we have a few minutes for Q&A. And first, I'd like to apologize. I said your pronouns incorrectly earlier. They, them, and theirs. I sincerely apologize for that. And I corrected myself in the chat. So they, them, and theirs. Thank you, Calen. This was incredible. How many people in here thought that they were a budget traveler, and then they come and watch Calen's presentation and they're like, oh, wait, there's so many more things that I could be doing, I could be including. And I do love how you're so inclusive. You try to be so inclusive, and that you try to make things accessible. And I love the fact that you said you can pick and choose. So your whole trip doesn't necessarily have to be done on a dime, but maybe infuse elements of what can be less expensive, right? So, and I think that's a great way for everyone to start if they want to budget a little bit more. So thank you for this. And we will start with a few questions, and then we won't be able to get through maybe all of the questions today, everyone. So please reach out to Calen on any of their social media networks, their website, YouTube, podcast. That's great. Hello, fellow podcaster. I love that. And I dropped Calen's information in the chat. I will drop it again in the chat if you'd like to get in touch with them. So first question actually comes from Nancy. What did you do with your bike after your concussion, since you said you were unable to continue cycling?
So after I smashed my bike. My bike was like an accordion. It literally, I've never seen metal bend like that. I said that people dropped me off at a hotel that was right next to a bike shop. So I took it into the bike shop, and they weren't able to fix it completely. It was still kind of mangled, but that's what I spent my $300 gift card on, was having them fix it. Obviously it had to have new tires, like the metal had to be bent, all of these things. So they spent a whole day, working on my bike, and that's where that money went. So I was able to ride my bike again, but it was honestly never the same. Like, it was always having problems. It still has problems. But I used that bike for the rest of the time. So I did continue using the bike, but it had some issues. It wasn't as pleasant as it was before that.
Wow, that's very interesting to know. So you didn't part ways with it at any point. You were like, this is with me.
Yeah, even when I would get in people's cars, like for ride shares, Craigslist ride share, stuff like that, that bike was in the back of the car, because that was my main way of transportation.
Okay. And what about to Hawaii?
Then I just sent it home, because I was like, you know what? I sent it to my parents' house, because I was like, I can't, it's a lot. I would always have to take a bike on the bus. It has to be boxed, but I didn't want to break the bike down. So I would always dumpster dive and get cardboard boxes and just tape them around my bike. And people would get really mad. But obviously I can't do that on a plane. So by that time, it was just time to send the bike home.
Okay. You had a good long run with it, it sounds like.
Yeah.
So that's great. Well, we're glad that you're here and well today, and that, the concussion didn't affect you long term. So, and that you are here to tell the story. So Maria, who's not here right now, wants to know, what are your favorite low cost travel destinations, and what is the next adventure for you?
Oh, honestly, I just got back from Mexico and Guatemala. I also, have been to Thailand before. I've heard Vietnam and Laos. So there are, honestly, all over the world, there are great, places to go if you are on a budget. But honestly, I think that knowing how to find the hostel work, or find a way to not pay for housing while you're there, can turn a lot of destinations into a budget destination for you. But I really, really love Central and South America, and some countries in Asia as well.
Latin America as a whole has a very special place in my heart, because I budget backpack through there. My budget, nothing compared to yours, but I did, I dropped in the chat. I bartended my way through Peru in order to slow the spending way down. Yes, way down. So that was also great. Okay, so MS mentioned really great ideas, but would love to know how you would do a lot of the things that you mentioned in countries with a language that you are not familiar with.
Yeah, that's a great question, because when I did this, I was in the USA, so English is my first language, and that wasn't as hard. But I would say, if you're doing this outside of the country, and it's in a language that you're not familiar with, use those more formal resources like Wolf, like Workaway, because they're already expecting people who don't speak the language. They're already set up for this. So they know how it's going to be. But it's like, you either have to learn ahead of time, or learn on the go. So I would hitchhike when I was an exchange student in Chile, when I didn't speak Spanish yet. And it's just this like game of signals and trying to figure out what each other is saying. So honestly, there's no really magical cure for that. It's like, learn as much as you can before you go, or when you get there, you're just gonna try to have to figure it out with people.
Absolutely. Yep, that is a great tip. I always support learning as much of the language as possible before you go to assimilate.
Yeah.
And Google Translate, of course, can be your friend. Sometimes I find that it doesn't work so well for me, but MS is actually living in Chile right now, the person who asked the question. So that is really cool. Okay, so Therese wants to know, what is hourly fishing?
Hourly fishing?
I think you had did you mention that in one of your slides?
I think I was talking about just like fishing trip, maybe.
Oh,
maybe
okay.
I was just talking about like, going on fishing trips, like the deep sea, I don't know, the deep sea fishing trips that people go on and things like that.
Okay, and that is what you recommend not doing, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, just because of the impact that it has. Obviously, you're killing an animal, but then all the plastic in the ocean is a huge problem.
Yes. So something to keep in mind. Thank you. EH says, great presentation. What medical shots are required to travel overseas? And do you have medical and or travel insurance?
So overseas, every single country is different. You have to go on to the embassy. Like I would find the U.S. embassy if I was going to Poland, I would go U.S. embassy website in Poland and see what, vaccinations or whatever is required. So you can never just say, I have these shots, now I can go anywhere. You always have to look up and see for that specific country because they also change over time. And to be honest, it's not good, but I never have had traveler's insurance and I do a lot of sketchy things. I haven't needed it yet, knock on wood. I keep telling myself I'm going to get it for my next trip, but you can buy traveler's insurance specifically before you go out of the country or you go to another state and something like that. And I know that the Nomadic Matt blog has a lot of good recommendations for travel insurance.
Yes.
Which also covers medical problems if you have them while you're overseas. So it covers both.
Yes, thank you for that. I know everyone has different opinions on travel insurance. It's interesting. And then it becomes more difficult when you're gone for a longer amount of time because it costs a lot of money, right? To insure yourself.
Exactly.
So
that's why I never did it.
I know it's a sticky situation. It's a really sticky. I even go back and forth personally with like, should I get it? Should I not? And I always try to, but then it's like, oh, it's a lot of money. I dropped in the, thank you for referring back. Nomadic Matt does have many resources on his blog about travel insurance. And recently there's one that's popped up recently that's really big for digital nomads. And this, the past 2 years is called Safety Wing. Sometimes it's as low as $1 per day, and it is medical insurance. So I would go ahead and check that out. And I think they're a partner of Nomadic Matt's as well, which is great. So thank you for those recommendations, Calen. So Cassie's question is, have you found that certain places are easier / harder to find vegan food?
So I've never really found it to be hard to find vegan food in the sense that there are usually beans, rice, veggies, fruits, nuts, seeds, most places that you go. But if I'm wanting a specialty vegan fish sandwich, some countries or some specific cities or places, like I'm not going to find that. I'm not going to have all these like fancy vegan foods that I have at home everywhere that I go. But I've never found it hard to find the basics, which usually cost less money and are healthier for you anyways. So it's usually this game of like, if this place doesn't seem very vegan friendly, of just eating, a burrito, a salad, sandwiches, things like this. And then when I get to the cities or more populated areas, then they usually have like specialty vegan things. But no, it's never been hard. But yeah, some places aren't making those specialty vegan cheeses and fancy stuff like that yet. But it's changing a lot. I've actually found that stuff in a lot of places where I didn't think I would.
I was just going to say, pardon me if I missed this, but how long ago was this trip?
This trip was in 2019.
Oh, so it wasn't that long ago. I was going to say so many more places.
Sorry, it was 2016. Why did I say 19?
Oh,
2016.
Okay. Turn it upside down and it makes a 6.
Yeah, like it was a 3 somewhere.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're still up and coming. I think 10 years ago, the food landscape was a lot different everywhere, but nowadays it's so easy. It's like standard to find vegetarian and vegan options on
Yes.
almost any menu. So
And
it's definitely become easier.
it does. And I have a full guide on my website that tells you how to go to any restaurant, no matter where you are, and find vegan options, even if they're not listed, and still have a really great meal. So if you search vegan on my website, you'll see that, pop up. So that can help a lot.
That's super helpful. Thank you. I dropped Calen's information in the chat again, everyone, if you would love to give them a follow, to thank them for spending an hour with us today and educating us on the coolest ways to, or the most efficient ways to budget your trips out. And if we have any last minute questions, I can absolutely take one or two more right now. To get Calen's presentation, please go ahead and sign up on their website. It's that first dotted line point in the information there, and you can go ahead and get the full presentation, which will be very helpful because there were tons, literally dozens of resources in this. It was amazing. So thank you. Okay, so, okay, one more. This is great from Sarah. Any tips for disabled travelers? I'm on a budget because I can't work.
Yeah, so I feel like I don't know the most about this because I'm not disabled, so I have not had the challenges that other people have. But I have noticed, because when I was writing this travel guide, this was a thing that came up. Like certain bus lines in the US, like I know that it's not Greyhound, it's Megabus, and Amtrak are starting to be really aware of these things. So they are some more low cost ways to be able to travel rather than just getting on a plane that are more friendly for people who are disabled. So I wish that I had more to share on that, but I only kind of know what my lived experience is. But I would say that there are some really interesting and great groups on Facebook for specific types of travel. And I have not looked it up, but I'm wondering if there's some groups on there where they can tell you, like, specifically, hey, go to this website. Hey, look on this blog and things like that. Because I think that could be super helpful.
100%. I think I use Facebook sometimes now, especially for groups. Their groups function has just, kind of took off in the past few years. But if you type in anything, really, even backpacking South America, you'll be able to find groups and resources on that. So I'm sure it's the same for, anything like disabled travelers. So,
and I have seen blogs from other disabled travelers who are on a budget. It's, all these specific things, like I'm always looking at vegan travel or something like this. So it's great to learn from someone who's living that and really knows, like, this is how you do it.
100%. 100%. Well, thank you so much. Actually, let's do one more. Nancy wants, can you pull up your slideshow again, the free overnights? And we'll have that we'll close out with that. Thank you everyone for spending time with us today.
Yes, thank you so much. I hope that you connect with me. And I have a lot of free information and a lot of really interesting stories of my own, but also of other people's. So if you sign up for that newsletter, it'll help you get started with whatever you're interested in. But let me share my screen with you. Okay. Is this the one?
I think so. Budget lodging. Nancy, if you're out there, you can just drop anything in the chat and say yes. This is great. I was waiting for couch surfing to come up. I was like,
yeah,
when is couch surfing coming?
Yes, I love couch surfing. It's so good.
So I have a question. For warm showers, can people who are non-cyclers use it? Like if they don't have access to a shower, but they're traveling somewhere, like they're not cycling, but they're traveling long-term somehow differently? I don't know. So that's a weird question.
I think the thing is that you could try, because it's a community of people who are like scrappy, cycling places and couch surfing, all that stuff. So it literally is like couch surfing, where it's a place for you to stay overnight, a place to sleep. It doesn't always mean you could have a shower or something like that. So it's literally the same thing as couch surfing.
Oh, okay.
Cyclers.
Oh, I thought it was literally a place to find warm shower.
No, it's just called warm showers. It's kind of the same thing, but the thing is, the people in there are so used to all these different types of budget travelers that it wouldn't hurt to ask, honestly.
Okay, interesting. That's great to know about that community. Okay, move one more slide over, please, and we'll see if it's this one. Finding work tips. I don't know if it's this one. Well, if you did miss it for any reason, like I said, I dropped Calen's contact info in the chat. I will drop it one more time. And that first line item there, you can actually get their presentation when you sign up. So go ahead, and that is the way we love to support our speakers. And a massive, massive thank you for being here for us. Oh, Hostess Sister is awesome. I've heard about Hostess Sister as well. Thank you, Therese, for that tip.
Yes.
Also, I will end on this. If you found the chat helpful and you want resources from the chat, if you are on desktop, when you go to the bottom right of your Zoom screen, there are 3 dots. And when you click on the dots, it will say save chat, and just hit save chat and it will save it to your desktop in like a Zoom or meeting folder. So that's a really good tip if you're on Zoom desktop. I will go ahead and save the chat now myself. And if you want the chat, you can go ahead and reach out to me and I will just send it to you. Email for chat. Anyways, again, Calen, thank you so much for this. This was incredible. I learned a ton from it, and I hope that we all came out of it learning to be better budget travelers and more conscious travelers as well, and more inclusive travelers.